Okay, I started working on a loose floral piece tonight, and I thought that I would record it, hang out here if anybody wanted to join, and if not, I will have a little video of something I'm working on here. So, what I have done to this point is just taken some of my, let me show you my palette here, cadmium red. And when I'm activating it, I'm bringing water in so that I have a really nice mix of water. Water to paint ratios are really important depending on what you're going for. And for for initial passes, I really like a more diluted look so that I have lots of transparency that I can either layer into or just use for that transparent look. So using cadmium red, and then you can see a few of the areas that I went back in while it was wet, and I had mixed up a little bit of cadmium yellow with that and right back up here in this corner. So I made some orange, and I'll just make another flower on here so you can see the initial process. Grabbing some of my cadmium red, lots of dilution there, and just using my brush to make some petal-like objects there. Um, and here we're going to put a couple that are shorter here that are facing us. This is a loose thing I'm going for here. We're not trying to define anything too tightly. And then I'm going to grab some of that orange up here and drop it right in. Now there's a lot of pigment there, so I can mix that a little bit. Once you have, this is a wet on wet technique because I put the initial layer down wet on dry, and then I'm going into this wet. That gives me a really nice first layer. Then down here, my friend Barb and Michael, who are also often in open studio with us, did some collage work with geraniums, and I do love geraniums. So I wanted to give some geraniums a go with some watercolor. So here I've just used my brush again to make some brush strokes for some of the little the buds that are drooping down from the bottom of the geranium. So I'm going to fill in some of these. Watercolor is often worked from light to dark, unlike oils and acrylics, where you're usually going from dark and then building lights up on top of those. I used to paint in oil a long time ago. Loved it when I did it, but once I had kids, watercolor was the way to go with no turpentine, very much less dry time, and various reasons I got into watercolor. And just I do play in acrylic a little bit once in a while. It's a fun thing to go back to, but watercolor is where I concentrate most of my time. So let's see, if I overdid it on those, then we can maybe make some of those into leaves later. But what I'm trying to do is I have a class tomorrow. I have two classes tomorrow, actually. One is at a assisted living home. People there just have a blast with watercolor. So we're going to practice using some brush strokes and this loose floral style painting, and I'll let you know what they think. We did a couple of different abstracts recently, and those are fun as well. I think those are fun for any level. But they want a little bit more structure, so we're gonna try some loose geraniums tomorrow. So I think of this first layer as just painting in a template for me to know where I'm putting things and not trying to make anything look too botanical. This is a loose interpretation. So I'm going from little spot to little spot. Now, okay, there you can see that I did not wait for my green to dry, which is always drying time is can be an issue, especially in classes when people don't want to wait. But you have several options. So I want to pick up a little bit of that. So what I did was I dried out my brush, rinsed it, dried it. Let me pull it over here, dried it. And then I can use it almost like a sponge to absorb up some of that water. So we'll take a little bit of that puddle out, we'll let it dry, and then we'll go back in and layer a little bit. Again, we're making the impression of these flowers. We're not actually doing anything botanical. So I'm going to let those dry a little bit. Um, so we talk in our classes about how cool colors make things recede. And here again, up in these flowers from the glare, I see this one is still pretty wet. And a lot of these are getting on toward more dry. They're drying. So I'm picking up a little bit of my French ultramarine and I'm going to, so I see these areas on these leaves that are still a little bit wet. They're drying quickly, but I'm just putting in a little bit of blue and I'm tucking it in near the flower because blue will help push it back. It's going to make it recede a little bit, and that's going to make my flower pop a little bit and give it some form. I often shade with blues and purples, and I can go back in and blend some of this out if I want to, but just that little bit of blue is going to help change up the color of green that I have, give it a little variety and a little bit of form. So we'll blend some of that out. And you can, I don't know if you can see or not, but when I'm blending on these paints on this paper, I am picking up a little bit. And so once I see what I've got there, I can go back in and layer some more color in. But yeah, so there it's like I lifted the color. But that's okay. That might work for me with some sunspots. Or I might go back in and layer. Lots of my watercolors use layer on layer on layer, and I like the look that that gives. So this little bud here that I was worried about actually is kind of cool the way it melded into that green. So I may wish I had done all of them a little bit wet like that. That's okay. We're going to just fill in some of these with that's I got a little dark there right away. Um, with some buds. I have to keep in mind that I want this project to be super accessible. We have lots of levels of experience. Most of them are not experienced tomorrow, but even at their ages, hand control, and so I want to make it accessible, so they have fun and they can kind of get something they're happy with. Okay, so we have some buds coming down there, and just for me, I'm going to put just some little stems here. I did not put a lot of thought into, I should have probably drawn a container of some sort, but I'm just winging it here, which is a fun way to paint. Um, so when I teach, I like to teach the 3 M's of watercolor. That's materials, mindset, and mechanics. So the mechanics, when I talk about mechanics, I'm talking about um, how to, like, what the rules of the game, right? And of course, rules are made to be broken, but if you learn the rules in the beginning, then you can learn how to break them and when you're breaking them. So the mechanics here that we talked about are things like wet on wet. If you want, if you look in here, how this yellow has just dispersed itself, you have no lines, you can tell that that yellow was put down on a wet surface. And well, here are my stems. My stems are put exactly, or they stayed exactly where I put them. That's on dry paper. So if you know those two rules alone, you're really ahead of the game because you can um, know what you can control and what you can't control, because that's life, right? When we try to control things that we can't control, we get upset and it doesn't work. We don't get to, we got to know when we can control things and when we can't. So watercolor is the same way. When we learn how the paint works and how it doesn't work, then we have an easier way bending that to what we're looking for. And there it went right in again because it's all wet, like I'm telling you all about. So that's okay. That's okay. That might look cool like the other one did there. I'll pick some of that up. That's lifting. That's another mechanics thing. And I can always layer back in, but it's giving me some really nice shades of pink in there. Um, I love to have variety, so some really darks, midtones, and really light lights, which is why I like to start with a super diluted wash as my underpainting. Okay, so now I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, what's next? Um, I think that I'm going to go in and define some of my middles. So I like to use a purple for that. And so I'm going to see whether I like my cadmium red with, this is Prussian. That looks like it might just get muddy. Some reds and some reds don't really make a great purple. And I feel like we ran into this on a different painting. I did. That purple looks like it'll be okay. So let me just get, that's the ultramarine and the cadmium. So let's see, we'll just put a little bit of that in. Now, this one, I really don't want to have it run out into the flower. Now, so I have done a lot of loose florals where I let that purple center run. That can be a really nice look, but I'm not going to go for that look right now. Going to try to keep this a little bit kind of confined so we don't get too much of a muddy look here. And I'm just pulling it over to the other flowers. So that dark purple is drawing our eye right into that center. Try to get some stuck up there out into the flower a little bit and give it some. So you can see how that is already drawing the eye into the center of that. And like I said before, we're making this picture really simple and accessible and kind of not much to it. What I want to do now is tuck a few more leaves up in here. So I'm just taking my brush, making those kind of geranium shaped leaves that are poking out from in behind there in a few different places. And we're not really painting leaves, we're painting the idea that there are leaves in there. And there's a difference. If I went in and I tried to paint all these perfect leaves in here, it probably would not look as much like a leaf as if I just go in and paint the idea. of some leaves in here. That's going to be more believable. And I like to think about making things that my eye believes because I have looked at many things that I've been working on and said, well, my eye doesn't believe that. What can I do to make that more believable? And sometimes it's a little bit less structure, a little bit less trying to be perfect and letting the eye or letting the paint do a lot of the work. But I do like to leave some of the under the really transparent wash that I've done underneath there. I like to let some of that shine through because um then I'm getting some different I'm getting some different transparency, some different values. I'm going to tuck a little bit these leaves are still wet, so I'm using that wet area to tuck a little bit of my blue in, and that's going to push that leaf back so that it looks like there are some things in the back and some things kind of get pushed forward. But that gives us a little bit of dimension there. And that leaf has dried pretty much, so it's not going to go further. Not going to go in there. That's okay. I can push these things around with my brush where I want to. So yeah, that line stayed pretty stark. So I'm going to just blend that out with my brush. Blending is one of those mechanical things that really comes in handy when you're laying down color and want to push it around a little bit. Okay, so now we have these buds down here, and I'm going to just put in a couple of areas where they might have a couple of layers of a couple of different shades in the buds. And here where I have some darker areas and some lighter areas, just gives some dimension to those flower buds. Tuck a little one right in here. And again, here I'm tending back toward I love the botanical style, but I have to be really careful. Um, and let the people know tomorrow that they don't need to add this level of detail if they don't want to, or if they can't with their hands. But up in here, this is looser, and so they could even just not do the buds. Now, I have a decision to make. I did not draw a pot for these that they're in, so I have to figure out what kind of container. I could make this not necessarily in a container, but I think I want a container. So not a good plan here. I think what I'll do is just make the idea of a container. And let's see, let's just pull maybe. So in negative painting, if I put these in a white container, I could paint something out here and just give the indication. That might be a good idea. Let's see what I'm gonna do here. Okay, let's see. Move this aside. I'm gonna just sketch in this little pot here. So this is typically not how I do it. I truly normally would have planned this out before I started, but I just wanted to paint. I've had a crazy, crazy kind of start to uh my schedule has been all over the place. I got taxes done, which I was so excited about, and I've had a lot of different weird things on my schedule. So I didn't start this the way I normally do, and this is not going to work because this is not going to meet up there. Let's see. There we go. Something like that. Sometimes last minute works, but one of the things I always say, I have to keep saying it to myself too, is that look at every time you pick up the paint as a practice session, and you will never ever be disappointed. Sometimes when we sit down and we saw something beautiful, we want to make something beautiful, and that's fine. We love it when our paintings work out. But if the intent is to paint a masterpiece, we are often can be disappointed. So when you take the mindset shift, that's one of the very important part of the mindset is look at every time you paint as practice, and you will never be disappointed because you will always have gotten some kind of practice out of your time painting. Okay, so I want to just fill in that little blank spot right there. And I think we're going to do just a leave in there. Just have one poking out right in there. And then we're going to just dab a little bit of that blue in there. I did that on some dry. And so we were talking earlier about layers, like the layers that you start as you're drying. If you add something, it's like, oh, I really like how that blue there looks. Then you start going around the painting and finding different places where it's appropriate to bump that up. So adding a little bit more blue into those areas that you pushed back with the blue. This actually started mixing on the page, and I got some nice greens in there. So I can mix a little bit more of that and bring it around. I love to see some different values whenever I am using green or any color, especially in a floral, to add some varieties of mixes. So if I'm doing everything with the same color green, it kind of is not as exciting as if I mix it up and I have some differing, like some yellow green, some blue green, and different mixes of those just to change it up. So let's grab a little bit more of that, bring some of those greens. And you also want to keep in mind where your light source is coming from so that that makes sense a little bit. Like my lightest and yellowest greens can be out where some light might be hitting it. But again, in this type of painting, I want to keep that in mind, but it's not a botanical. It's a loose impression of geraniums. So don't get too wrapped around the axle about anything. Okay, now if you look at that and you say, I don't like all those hard lines in there, go in and break some of those up. You can blend. You do want to be careful about overworking because it's so easy to do. But um, you can blend a little bit and not hurt a thing. Okay, so I think I want to go in with a little bit of burnt sienna, which is it's like a reddish, brownish kind of look. And I'm gonna just add a couple of stem areas where it's appropriate, just to keep them grounded a little bit. And in here, gonna add a little bit more, just a pop of some more of that green, so it doesn't look like it's floating in there. Now I've got to make a decision about my pot. And I think I'll just make it some light shades of, yeah, I can't decide whether to paint the pot some burnt sienna or paint around it. I think I'm going to paint around it. So this is I just painted that on dry paper. I'm going to come around. This is called negative painting. I'm painting around the object, what's not there, and then the object appears. So what I would typically do is take a piece of paper and make a line there so that I know that I'm going straight across. But we are really just winging it here, which is also fun for practice. Just not really planned out, just following our nose, and we'll see what we get. If you ever want to paint up to a section with clear water and drag that paint around, that's another fun way to blend your paint. You may get blooms, which the best way to learn about blooms is when you do your work and you get them, and then it's when you charge into an area with more water than was in the mixture before. So they're not fun in areas where you don't want them, and they're really cool in areas where they work, like in clouds and in waves, in florals, in leaves. They can look really really cool. They can add a nice effect to your work. But if you're doing something and you really don't want them, then it's good to know how to avoid them. And that is, oh, sorry about that. Um, that is made if I charge in here with water, you can see how that water is pushing that pigment out of the way. And if I let it dry that way, it's also sometimes called a cauliflower. Um, yeah, I'm going to blend that out. So, and you can see there, I'm pushing a lot of pigment away because of the water that was carried there. And so depending on what you've got going on in your piece, that might be harder to do. And so it's better to avoid a bloom if you don't want a bloom in there. Um, so with this, I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow and I'm going to pop a little bit of green down below just because some reflected light in in my table. So I'm going to just pop it in a little bit where it might be wet or damp, just to get that look in there. And then once that all dries, I'll put a little bit of shadow in there. But you can see how painting around the bottom helped my container appear. So in a piece like this, the question always comes up, to background or not to background. And it's a matter of choice, what you like and prefer. Sometimes if I'm just doing a little uh, thing like this, I'll leave it putting a background on here now, if I were going to be really purposeful or really would be a lot of work because of all of the jagged edges around it. But one really simple way to do a background on something like this is just a watercolory look. So if I take clear water and I paint up to some of the pieces in my work, there's not a lot of pigment on some of that area there. That's letting go a little bit of some, but I can pop in a little bit more color and drag some of that out into the background for a real pretty watercolory look. So there's a little on my brush there too. And when I see people do this on paintings, I might be like, no, don't do it, which is fair. But I wanted to show you that because it can make a really, really nice, it can make a really nice effect. And it just adds a little bit to the watercolory look. Now that I did it on that side, I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. Just bringing it up to the painted areas. And if there's not much pigment to activate there, then I can drop a little bit more in. But if I had more pigment down in those areas, it would just let go a little bit like that and crawl out into the background. And then I can move it around and just get a real pretty watercolory background. So simple, but it's a watercolory look. And then I would do a little bit of that same thing up here. I'm hitting into my flower, but there's not a ton of paint on there because I only made like one pass through there. So I'm gonna, like I've been doing, drop in a little bit more pigment so that I can get that nice light little wash. I might even do that a little bit here with the green. Let some of that sneak out into the background. And if you don't like that look, then just leave it blank. The white understated is a very legitimate answer to, I don't want a background. So no need if you don't want to. And I can use the paper, I can tilt the paper a little bit to make it run and get some of that moved around. And if I don't like everything that's going on, I can blend it, which I kind of do like what that's doing. And so I don't think I need to touch it, but it gives it, this is trying to be a loose watercolor, and so we can help it be just that. I am kind of tempted to do a little something on my vase. So let's see. Trying to think like a maybe a blue stripe, or I also want to do some a little bit of shading. And I'm going to say my light is coming down from this way, so that would make my shadow come out on this side. Gonna have this drawn right across. This is a Prussian blue. I really love Prussian blue. So many uses. Just putting a little bit of shadow there. And of course, my flowers in there are going to give it a more jagged look. So I've got to lay in a little bit of just the indication that we have some shadows being made by some of the plants. Again, it's not precise. I don't have anything sketched out or figured out. A little bit of shadows thrown over here for these. So the light is coming in this way. It's throwing. Now, what to do with the what to do with a pot? I don't want it stark white. So let's see about some light blue on here. That's a start. And then maybe, I'm not sure what we would have here if we have some shading. Yeah. I don't recommend this paint the pot after the flowers deal, but here we are. That's okay. I'm gonna do uber light up in there a little bit. I'm not trying to make this a completely blue pot, but looks like that's where I'm going. So maybe we just have a little white stripe down there. I'm not sure. A little green splatter there. Just deepening some of those shadows. Now we're gonna have to do that a couple places. a little bit strong, so I'm gonna blend some of that out. Pull some of those darker values up here into the right up under the container because that's where they're gonna be closest or darkest. Now I'm seeing, I don't hate the vase, don't love it, but it's okay. I could go back up in there and add some more, uh, more values in the flowers. Um, but I think we're gonna call that a wrap. Simple, um, just trying to even out that bottom of the vase. It's fun little exercise. It is a good thing to do some attempts at loose paintings because when you only do one type of painting and it's always super, super controlled, it's a great way to paint. I love to paint like that, but challenging yourself to let go a little bit is is a really good thing too. Okay, I can't help it. I'm gonna put in just a little bit of darker reds up in here. I hope I don't regret this, but here we are. Put some on the top. It doesn't belong on the top. It kind of belongs. I'm using this red to define my leaves or petals a little bit. Gonna blend some of that out. Just a little echo of some darker. No, I can't see it upside down. I'm using the marks that I made with the brush to kind of guide me to where I'm placing these because I'm just using these to define my petals a little bit more than they are now. So blending those. In a couple weeks, I will be doing a dueling painting thing where I have to create a piece very quickly. I think I have about an hour. And I've done it before. It's really challenging, but this kind of exercise actually is great prep for that. Um, it's not how I normally paint, but I do these exercises once in a while, and that helps you let go of a lot of control, what you think you have control over. So, okay, I could keep messing with this, but I'm going to add a little bit right here. And oftentimes when you watch somebody paint, it's like, okay, when does it stop? When do you end it? Um, you want to end it before it's overworked, which is not always easy. Every artist I've ever talked to has had the experience of overworking a piece. It's no fun, but it happens and we learn, and that's the whole point. So, um, we're going to call that finished. Fun little geranium exercise. And if you if you try this, I'd love for you to post your results. And Barb and Michael, thank you for the geranium inspiration. Okay, have a great night, and I will see you soon.